Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our annual Publishers Picks Rep Night 2020. I am broadcasting here from Barrett Bookstore, but as you all know, we are not together this evening. And while we are very much missing not being together and welcoming you with a glass of wine and some holiday cheer, we're so glad that you've made the choice to be with us this evening. We know that you have a lot of things you could be doing, and we're grateful that you're here with us tonight. Joining me are our distinguished publisher representatives from across a variety of houses, and I'm going to introduce each of them as it is their turn to present tonight. We have Jennifer Black, Mackenzie Brody, and Sophie Stewart. Before we get started, I want to give a big thank you to my colleague, Rosanna Neeson, who helped to pull this event together tonight and worked tirelessly with our reps to come up with the list and get those to you tonight. We do have all of the books that are going to be shared available on our website so that you can see the picks there. And we are going to put a link up in the chat and also in the call to action at the bottom of your screen. So you will be able to access those picks in a list format after we are finished presenting tonight. In addition, I'm going to show you visuals along the way. And if you have any questions, we're open 10 to 6 tomorrow, and you can feel free to ring us if you miss anything tonight. A little bit of housekeeping for those of you who haven't used Crowdcast before. It is a webinar format, so we cannot see you. So feel free to put your feet up, put your cozy clothes on, grab your glass of wine. It's just the four of us who are visible to you tonight. We have a chat feature on the side, which I can see some of you have started using. Feel free to chat there about the books that are being presented. If you have a question that you would like for me to share with the reps, we will have a few minutes at the end for some Q&A. And there is a little box at the bottom of your screen that says Ask a Question. You can put your questions there, and Rosanna will sort through them. And then if we have time at the end, we will get to them. So that's all for now. I'm going to let Sophie and Mackenzie have a little break from the screen. And I'm going to give you a brief introduction to Jen. So goodbye, Sophie. It's the magic. I feel like, you know, the magic maps. Last week, we're all on magic maps. Now I'm on my magic publisher web. Okay, goodbye, Mackenzie. Jen has been in the publishing industry for 30 years, 25 plus years at Penguin Random House, and she is passionate about connecting readers with writers. Jen, we're so glad you could join us tonight. Take it away. And I have to unmute you first would be helpful. Okay, there you go. Now we can hear you.
Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. This is one of my favorite nights of the year. Sorry we're not there in person, but I'm delighted to be able to have the opportunity to chat about some of my favorite books from this year. And hopefully you'll be inspired to give them as gifts this holiday season or add them to your own personal bookshelf. So the first book I want to talk about came out early this year. It's called Hidden Valley Road. I think this is one of the best books I read the entire year. From page one, I was completely engrossed in this tragic American family drama. On the outside, the Galvins of Colorado were extraordinary. They were the epitome of a very large, successful middle-class family. But things were not what they seemed on Hidden Valley Road. In this terrifying medical mystery, 6 of the 12 Galvin children were diagnosed with schizophrenia. And Robert Kolker delivers an incredible feat of narrative nonfiction. It's a fascinating and frightening page-turner that explores the cause and effect of schizophrenia and the devastating effects that it can have on a family. But he does it with such compassion. He tells their story with incredible care. Not to mention, it's an absolute page-turner. It's a brilliant work that you can easily give to the fan of Killers of the Flower Moon or Say Nothing or Stranger in the Woods. I have a bookseller up in Madison who says, much like the disease itself, this book is a slow burn that builds to a violent crescendo, utterly captivating. Hidden Valley Road peers over the white picket fence and takes a hard look at what it means to be mentally ill in America. Kolker is a New York Times bestselling writer. His last book was a New York Times notable. This one climbed to #1 on the Times list in April. in the middle of lockdown, and it was chosen by Oprah for one of her book clubs. So don't take it just from me. Lots of people have loved it. It's an incredible read. If you like narrative nonfiction, you're going to love this book. Let's see. My next one is Jessie. You know her. Her debut, Homegoing, was an epic historical novel. I think I spoke about it a couple of years ago. It's about two half-sisters from Ghana whose lives take wildly different paths when one of them sold into slavery. When it was published in 2016, it was one of the biggest literary fiction debuts of that year, and it's gone on to become a contemporary classic. To say that her new one was highly anticipated is an understatement. Where Homegoing was epic, this new book is intimate. Transcendent Kingdom focuses on one immigrant family living in contemporary Alabama. The main character, Gifty, is a scientist who seeks to rationalize her brother's addiction and her mother's depression while grappling with the evangelical faith in which she was raised. Jessie, she mixes science and religion brilliantly as she's trying to answer the big questions. Why do bad things happen, and what gives life meaning? This book's about family and loss and belonging. It's about race and addiction and grief. It was an instant bestseller when it published earlier this year. It was a Today Show Read with Jenna book club pick. It's been hailed as brilliant by Ann Patchett, USA Today, The Washington Post, The New York Times, and The New Yorker. It's definitely one of the literary events of the year. And I think another one of the most exciting literary events or publications this year is Megha Majumdar's commanding debut novel, A Burning. This literary tour de force is set in contemporary India, and it follows three very different characters as their lives become entangled when one of them, a young woman, makes a careless Facebook post and is accused of terrorism. It's written in short, propulsive chapters with expert plotting and suspense. It's a thriller that tackles the literary themes of class and corruption, terror and fate, and what it feels like to be powerless in a country that is spinning out of control. Megha was born in India, but she came to the US to attend Harvard and Johns Hopkins, and this is her first book, and it was just nominated for a National Book Award. It was also named one of the most anticipated books of the year by The Times, The Journal, Entertainment Weekly, Vogue, O. So a variety of different publications have come to give critical praise to Megha's debut. It was also a Read with Jenna book club pick, and I think it's a can't miss book if you love Jessie or Tommy Orange or Jhumpa Lahiri. My next book is Hamnet, and this book is the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction this year, and it's a gorgeously imagined, critically acclaimed novel that's set in Shakespearean England during a pandemic. This book is definitely striking a chord now. It's England in 1580, and the Black Death is sweeping across Europe. An ever-present threat is terrifying the healthy and the sick, the young and the old alike. All of this sounds incredibly familiar. I think one of the main points, though, is even though in all of this terror and drama, life goes on. This book's centered around Shakespeare. And when Shakespeare's young son, Hamnet, dies, suddenly we realize that this book is about grief, how we experience it, how we respond to it, what it costs, and who it damages. It's also a moving meditation about how art imitates life in Shakespeare's time and in our own. And in that way, this book is perfect for the moment that we're in. But for something completely different, I have a new Jane Smiley that is coming out soon. I just got this copy today. Perestroika in Paris tells the completely unique story of a boy, a horse, and a dog who walk into a bakery in Paris at Christmas time. It's an improbable scenario that Jane delivers in such an upbeat, charming book. It's a fairy tale about relationships told through this incredibly colorful cast of characters. A delightful confection full of wit and humor, rich in details about Parisian butchers and bakeries and parks. It's completely escapist. It's full of insight and observations about quirky humans. And I just found it so sweet and joyful. It's a short book. It celebrates themes of friendship, love, and freedom. If you're looking for escapism, this one's for you. One of my favorite quotes just came in and says, "This is the perfect book for those of whom the real world, racked with pandemic and politics, has become something to avoid. In her fable-like travels around Paris, the racehorse Para encounters a wise raven who dispenses advice, an 8-year-old orphan who can hide a horse, and plenty of happy endings, not just for the animals, but for the people they encounter, especially if they're open to seeing the wonders of the world." So I think that you will love this as much as I did. Complete surprise. And then for something a little bit more serious, I have a major biography called Red Comet. It's a deeply researched bio of the life of the poet Sylvia Plath, whose suicide at age 30 sealed her mythos. This magisterial biography separates the work of the writer from her life. It looks at her depression, her failing marriage, her terror at being institutionalized, and it provides new scholarship that gives a very full portrait of this complex and often romanticized woman that dismisses her literary achievements. This book is a myth buster. It overturns the cliches of the Plath mythology that has become embedded in our culture. And it asserts that Sylvia was a serious intellectual, equal to her contemporaries and to her husband, yet crippled by depression and the tragedy of her doomed marriage. Clark makes it clear that Sylvia was way more than just a suicidal ingenue. And our author, Heather Clark's very well connected. She's from Harvard and Oxford and the City University of New York. And this book has already landed on a number of anticipated fall lists. We expect tremendous coverage for it. So if you're looking for a smart biography, Red Comet's for you. I have 2 glorious cookbooks on my list. The first one is A Good Bake. And this just came today. It goes on sale Tuesday. It must weigh 10 pounds. It's absolutely gorgeous. And this is for the person that maybe bought more yeast this year than in the last 5 years combined, or if you even tried a sourdough starter at the beginning of quarantine, or if you have an annual cookie swap coming up, then Melissa Clark's A Good Bake is a perfect gift. If you love chocolate babka, her recipe made her famous. She's been included in all of the best of fall cookbook previews, everywhere from the New York Times to Eater to Epicurious on the Rob Report. A little bit about Melissa. She worked as a chemical engineer for a decade before she took on pastry. And now she has a James Beard nomination and is one of the most respected pastry chefs in the country. This would make a great gift for your foodie. And then I think Spaka is my second cookbook by Nancy Silverton. There are plenty of meat books out there, but nearly none are written by women. Nancy Silverton has a Michelin star, several James Beard awards, and Spaka is already landing on many Best of the Year cookbook roundups. If you don't know her, she definitely has the chops. Both Fortune and Food and Wine magazine named her one of the most innovative women in food and drink. She was recently profiled on Netflix Chef's Table. Her restaurant of the same name was chosen as one of the best new restaurants in the country by GQ, Esquire, and Bon Appetit. Spaka is definitely a chefy book for your food and wine crowd. And although it is meat-centric, there are 15 seafood recipes, 26 non-meat sides, gorgeous salads, and seasonal desserts to sink your teeth into. It's really gorgeous. And if you're looking for a show-stopping lobster pot pie or a crowd-pleasing family-style butterscotch budino for the holidays, then definitely check out Spaka. And that's my holiday roundup. I've got a couple of books that I'd love to talk about that are coming up early in the year. First up in January is William Boyd's delightful new novel, Trio. I think I have a galley. This is what the jacket looks like. It's a fun, funny, suspenseful story that will satisfy any reader. It centers on a love triangle between a movie producer, a novelist, and an actress, all leading secret lives while on a troubled movie set in England in 1968. There are lots of twists and turns and lots of humor, and this one is one of his best and most entertaining novels to date. Then in March, I have Ishiguro's Clara and the Sun, which is shaping up to be one of the literary events of 2021. It's his first novel since he won the Nobel Prize, and it's the story of an AI friend with outstanding observational qualities who, from her place in a store, is carefully watching the behavior of the people that come in and those that pass by outside, while she remains hopeful that a customer will take her home. It's short, it's propulsive, it's about what it feels like to be young and what gives life meaning and what it truly means to love. It's an unforgettable celebration of humanity. And that one is Clara and the Sun. And in April, super excited about this New York Times best-selling author, Chris Bohjalian. He delivers a page-turning historical thriller set in 17th century New England on the eve of the Salem witch trials. This book is called Hour of the Witch, and it centers on a young Puritan woman who escapes her abusive husband only to possibly face the gallows. The New York Post says everything Bohjalian writes is addictive, but this book has poison, drinking, adultery, religious fanaticism, courtroom drama, and witches. I think we have a blockbuster here that tackles love and fear, feminine power, and mass hysteria. And it has an absolute, I don't know if you can tell from here, it has an absolute gorgeous jacket. And last but not least, in May, I have from best-selling and prize-winning writer Jhumpa Lahiri, a brand new novel, the first one in 8 years from Jhumpa. So it's another literary event. Whereabouts is a modern-day Mrs. Dalloway with an Italian setting. It's about one transformative year in the life of an unnamed middle-aged woman in an unnamed city that seems a lot like Rome. And it's short, it's intimate, it's a great character study about the interior life of one woman and her longing and loneliness. I think if you love Claire Massoud or Otessa Moshfegh or Rachel Cusk, then this new Jhumpa Lahiri is for you. You can pre-order it now. Goes on sale in April. And that sums it up for me. Thanks for listening.
Jen, that's such a good list. And so many of these picks are staff favorites, and you've seen them on our staff pick shelf. And I'm so glad that you had an opportunity to hear from Jen, because her enthusiasm is small. And I'm putting pre-orders on. So you can pre-order via our website as well. You can see that in the link that we've put up. So go get them. Thanks, Jen. And I am now going to do my magic and invite Mackenzie Bronk up onto the screen. Give me one moment, please.
Hi.
Hi, Mackenzie. Mackenzie is with Hachette, and she is a representative who works with stores in New York City and Connecticut and Hudson Valley, and she lives in Brooklyn with her 2 cats, one of which at least is joining us tonight. I know somewhere in the background. So Mackenzie, I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'll be here to show off the books, but take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm very sad we can't all be together in person, but so glad we can find a way to chat with you all about these books. And thank you to Barrett Bookstore for facilitating this. I sell both adult and kids titles, so I will be presenting both to you today. The first book I wanted to talk to you about is actually two books at once, which is Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram X. Kendi and Stamped, which is the young adult version of the book written by Jason Reynolds. If you don't know, Stamped from the Beginning is the National Book Award winner for nonfiction from 2017, I believe, and it explores the history of racism and racist ideas in America. And Stamped came out earlier this year, and it's a young adult remix of sorts of the original. They've both been really important to the cultural conversations that have been happening this year surrounding race and Black history. And in particular, I wanted to highlight Stamped, the young adult version. This book is technically written for teens, but I think that there's something in here that even adults can get a lot out of. I can speak for those of us adults at my publishing company that will say that when we read this, we learned a lot. And so I think it's a really good conversation starter for the whole family. Jason Reynolds distills this information so brilliantly. He actually called it a work of translation rather than an adaptation, really, sort of translating these complex ideas into a book for teens. And also, since our Random House colleagues are on the line, I have to recommend How to Be an Anti-Racist, also by Ibram X. Kendi. I'm actually listening to it on audiobook right now, and it's amazing. So next up is Homeland Elegies by Ayad Akhtar. This is, I know Paige loved this book. This was one of our big fiction books of the fall, and I think it couldn't have come out at a better time. It's not often we say that. Fall is so hectic, especially when it comes to news and especially in an election year, but I think this timely novel really added to a lot of the conversations happening right now. Ayad Akhtar, who is also the author of American Dervish and the Pulitzer Prize winning author of the play Disgraced. In this novel is sort of informed by his life growing up Muslim in Milwaukee after 9/11. And he tells this story through the lens of a father and son, Ayad and his father, living in the post-Trump era. And it explores the tensions between Pakistani immigrants, and Americans. And the blending of fact and fiction in this book is so seamless. It really feels like you're reading his memoir. It's some of the most unique writing I've ever read. And his personal reflections really shine through. We've gotten amazing blurbs from Sigrid Nunez, Salman Rushdie, Jennifer Egan, Phil Cly, and many more. And yeah, it's great for anyone that likes literary fiction. It's a great gift. Next up, speaking of gifts, is Classical Mythology A to Z. So Black Dog and Leviathan, which is one of our publishers, does these amazing gifty books, especially during the holiday season. And I think that this would make a really great gift for adults or teens. I feel like I'm admitting how much of a nerd I was as a teen to say that I would have loved to have gotten this book. This is a perfect companion to something like Mythology by Edith Hamilton. There are more than 700 mythological characters examined in this book. And I also just especially think this would be a really cool gift to give as a companion to one of the many novels that have come out in the last few years that are sort of based on Greek mythology. There have been so many that are either modernizations of Greek mythology or retellings. I know when I read Circe by Madeline Miller, I felt like I was Googling every 20 pages to remember who all of the characters were. So I think that this would make a really lovely gift. Next up is The Best of Me by David Sedaris. I don't think Paige doesn't have a copy of it, but you guys, that's okay.
We can't keep this on the shelf is why we don't have a copy. So we are getting a big shipment in tomorrow, early next week, but you can call yes. On the list.
Yeah, I feel like there isn't a person in my life who I don't want to give this book to for the holidays. This is a best of the best essay collection from David Sedaris, with one brand new essay to boot. He's always had such a unique way of discussing often dark or serious topics with such a beautiful sense of humor and grace. And I think it's the perfect time to dip into his work if you haven't, or revisit his best essays as chosen by him. And also a quick shout out if you like audiobooks. David Sedaris is like the master of the audiobook form. They are incredible. I listened to his previous book, Calypso, on a road trip last summer with my family because there were 5 of us in the car, all different ages, like could not by any means decide like what would work for all 5 of us. And it seemed like the center of that Venn diagram was only David Sedaris. And it was a really great road trip because of him. So that will make a great gift. Next up, for something entirely different, We Keep the Dead Close by Becky Cooper. This just went on sale 2 days ago, and it's one of my personal favorites on the list. In this book, journalist Becky Cooper explores a 50-year-old unsolved murder of a graduate student in the anthropology department at Harvard. Rumors abounded at the time that she was killed by a professor who was worried that he'd be ruined by their affair, but he was never officially charged. And then decades later, the crime was still discussed in whispers amongst the female students as kind of a cautionary tale, which is how the author learned about this story. And in fact, when the author learned about this story, that suspected professor was still employed. And Becky became obsessed with this woman, Jane Britton, and just does an incredible deep dive into this horrible crime and explores the three main suspects in the case. And sort of through that exploration, the case takes her down completely unexpected and fascinating tangents. And the book isn't just about the murder, but also about the lengths that institutions of power like Harvard will go to protect themselves, and also about the history of abusive power that's rampant in academia. Stories like this tend to focus on the crime, but I think the author does an incredible justice to Jane herself by telling her story so fully, especially because her name often got erased when this cautionary tale was sort of passed around at Harvard. So I do think this is perfect for true crime fans, but it's also a great choice for anyone that just likes good storytelling and narrative nonfiction. Next up is a bit of a sad one, Answers in the Form of Questions. This is a book I wanted to touch on really briefly. It was one of my personal favorites on the fall list, and obviously this week has taken on a bit more of a somber tone. This book literally came out 2 days ago, which was 2 days after Alex Trebek's passing. I don't know about you, but Sunday was a very sad day in my household. Well, I didn't grow up watching Jeopardy. It's been absolutely essential to my quarantine experience. My roommate and I have not missed a single episode for the past 8 months. We watch it every single night during dinner. And Alex Trebek has been the most reliable touchstone in these chaotic times. So this book is a history of the whole show, not just Alex Trebek, although he is obviously a core part of it. And I think it will make a great gift for any fan, anyone who's mourning Alex Trebek, honestly, and just like the nerd in your life will really, really enjoy it. Next up is the cookbook I wanted to talk about on our list, which is The Rise by Marcus Samuelsson. So this book contains 150 recipes that celebrate African-American cooking and its essential place in our food culture. If you don't know who Marcus Samuelsson is, he's the owner of more than 30 restaurants around the world, as well as the host of PBS's No Passport Required. I personally know him as being a Chopped judge back in the day. As he explains in this book, Black cooking has always been about more than soul food, with flavors tracing to the African continent, to the Caribbean, all over the United States and beyond. And it features a mix of sort of everyday food and also celebration cooking. The book also includes an introduction to the pantry of the African diaspora, which I think is really interesting. And as he notes, Black cooks and creators have often led American culture forward with their sort of contributions to cooking, but Black authorship has been consistently erased from the story of American food. And Marcus attempts to rectify that here while also telling his own story. And then last up for the adult titles, something very different, is The Once and Future Witches. This is the second novel we've published from Alex E. Harrow, following in the footsteps of her first book, The 10,000 Doors of January, which I loved, and is also a great paperback gift. This book is a similar blend of historical fiction with sort of fantastical or magical elements. It's set at the end of the 19th century in a world where magic once existed, but has all but been eradicated, and the only real power as a woman worth fighting for is at the ballot box. So the book centers on three sisters who decide to join the suffragette movement, and they get swept up in it. And as they do, their old forgotten magic starts to grow stronger inside of them, and they begin to explore ways in which they can use that magic to assist in the suffragettes movement and push it forward. So I would say this is great for fantasy lovers, but also, like her first book, it reads like historical fiction because it's really grounded in reality. So I would recommend it to anyone that likes good historical fiction as well. Next up for some kids, stuff. The first is The Silver Arrow, which I don't believe we have a copy of. But The Silver Arrow by Lev Grossman is a really special middle grade fantasy novel that feels like an instant classic when you read it. The book is about a pair of siblings, a boy and a girl, and on the girl's 11th birthday, an enormous life-size magical train, think like Polar Express size, appears in their backyard, and their mysterious uncle tells them to hop aboard. They suddenly find themselves the conductors of this magical train that goes around the world helping animals in various places get where they need to go. Most of the animals are fleeing from environments where they can no longer stay, and these animals are really the beating heart of the story. While the girl and her brother help the animals in turn teach the siblings and the reader the importance of preserving nature and the environment. The author Lev Grossman, if you don't know, is a very popular adult fantasy writer. He's the writer of the Magician series, and this is his first foray into children's literature. The book is actually developed from a bedtime story that he used to tell to his daughters. It was one of many bedtime stories he made up, and it really comes through in the writing. Like we've heard from a lot of booksellers and customers that it makes a really, really great read aloud for parents to read with their kids. And then next up, also middle grade, so for ages 8 to 12, is Becoming Muhammad Ali. Before he was the greatest, Cassius Clay was just a boy growing up like any other in Louisville, Kentucky, hanging out with friends, going to school, and because he was Black, facing an inordinate amount of racism. He began training as a boxer at age 12 and started the journey that would eventually transform him into Muhammad Ali. So this is a fictionalized retelling of Ali as a boy, told in both prose and verse from two master storytellers, James Patterson and Kwame Alexander. James Patterson, as you likely know, the author of about a zillion books for adults and children, and Kwame Alexander is also a very prolific author, known most recently as being the Caldecott award-winning writer of The Undefeated, which was also a picture book about Muhammad Ali. And they are just an incredible partner duo in this. They're both so passionate about this project and both are huge fans of Muhammad Ali, which really comes through. The book is off to a really great start. It got 5-star reviews. So yeah, I think it would make a great gift. It's really educational, but also a really great read. Last but not least, I just wanted to talk about one picture book that I thought would be a fun gift, The Alphabet's Alphabet. I know that there are obviously a lot of alphabet books out there, but this one is so unique and inventive and funny. In this book, each letter reveals itself to be another letter in disguise. For instance, the A is just a tired H, and a B is a D with its belt on too tight. The author, Chris Harris, is also the author of a book called I'm No Good at Rhyming, which is so great. And he brings the same sort of clever use of wordplay and hijinks and puns galore to this picture book. And the illustrations by Dan Santat are so fun and vibrant. He's one of my favorite illustrators. And they both manage to bring new life to the alphabet in a fresh and engaging way. And then just a few books coming in early 2021 that we are excited about. The first one is called Nick by Michael Ferris Smith. This is a really, really cool project. I don't know if you can tell from the tiny picture of the cover, but it's not so subtle call out to The Great Gatsby, but this is a novelization of the life of Nick Carraway, who's the protagonist of The Great Gatsby, which is a sort of a new take from Michael Ferris Smith. He primarily writes Southern Gothic novels. But in The Great Gatsby, if you remember, we know so little about Nick's backstory. And so Smith really reimagines his life here. It was sort of a seed of an idea that he had, and he realized he had to run with it. It really reads like a historical novel, even if you don't remember the plot points of The Great Gatsby. Because one thing we do know is that Nick Carraway was a war veteran in World War I. So this reads like a really good historical war novel. So yeah, I would recommend this to anyone that likes good historical fiction. And then next up is Who is Maud Dixon? This is coming in March 2021 by Alexandra Andrews. And this is sort of a big buzzy thriller we have coming out. I won't tell too much about it because I don't want to give too much away, but centers on a girl named Florence who happens to work in book publishing, of all things, and she believes that she's destined to be a famous writer someday. And she stumbles into this job as an assistant to this brilliant, enigmatic novelist named Maud Dixon, whose true identity is a secret. And it sort of appears like Florence's life is finally getting on track. But when they're both on location in Morocco doing research for Maud Dixon's next book, there's an accident, and Florence wakes up in the hospital after the accident with no memory of the previous night and no sign of her boss, Maud Dixon, anywhere. And she realizes that she's been presented with this amazing opportunity because no one would know if she took over Maud Dixon's life, because no one knows who Maud Dixon is. So ultimately, this is a novel about the lengths that people will go to achieve their ambitions. We've gotten in great blurbs from writers like Marie Semple and Ann Patchett. And yeah, it comes out in March. And then last but not least, speaking of ambitions, Ambitious Girl by Mina Harris. This is a picture book coming out in January. This is an amazing, inspirational picture book for the ambitious girl in your life, about reclaiming words that have often been used to put girls down, like too loud or too ambitious or too much. This is written by Mina Harris, who has definitely risen to prominence this year. She's very famous in her own right as the CEO of the organization Phenomenal, but also grown to fame rather recently as Kamala Harris's niece, and has been a core part of her campaign this year, and has been on the road with her. She actually recorded the audiobook on the road 2 weeks ago in Wilmington, Delaware, working so hard for us. So she wrote a book last year about Kamala and Maya. But this book, I think, would be a great gift for a daughter, or even a really cute baby shower gift. And it has beautiful illustrations by a debut illustrator named Marissa Valdez. So that's it for me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie. Such a wonderful list. All right, well, we're gonna bring Sophie Stewart up now. Hi, Sophie. Sophie is with Penguin Random House. She grew up in her family's bookstore in DC, and after college, she moved to work in the publishing industry. She came back over to the indie bookstore side for a while at a book. She was the buyer at a Brooklyn store and has now returned to publishing. And we're so glad she's with us tonight. Take it away, Sophie.
Thanks for having me. Thank you to everyone at Barrett for putting all of this together, and to all of you for being here tonight. I'm going to kick my list off with some excellent short stories for those who love literary fiction. Daddy by Emma Cline. I hope her name will be familiar to some of you. Her debut novel, The Girls, was a fictionalized account of the Manson family that made a big splash when it came out back in 2016. And since then, you may have seen some stories from her pop up in places like the New Yorker and the Paris Review. Some of those stories are included in this new collection. And I think that author Brandon Taylor really put it perfectly in his New York Times review of the book, where he said that these stories are almost classical in structure. They have the clean, bright lines of modernist architecture. So while she's young and these stories are distinctly modern and they definitely have a bit of an edge, they also reminded me a bit of James Salter or John Updike. The characters have this sort of unnerving potential for bad decisions, and you realize that there's always the possibility of self-destruction kind of simmering below seemingly normal people's everyday routines. There's a great sense of tension here. And anyone who enjoys well-crafted, subtle fiction would really love this, whether they're fans of people like John Cheever or more contemporary writers like Lauren Groff or Karen Russell. Next up is Cast. I'm going to move over to nonfiction. Actually, I have a very nonfiction heavy list this year. So Cast is the new book from Pulitzer Prize winner Isabel Wilkerson, who previously wrote The Warmth of Other Suns, a book about the Great Migration that really became an instant classic when it was published about 10 years ago, I think. She is unquestionably doing the same thing here with Cast. It's going to be essential reading for years to come. It's already been an Oprah pick. It's been weeks on the bestseller list, and it also was named to the National Book Award long list this year. She's describing caste as the invisible organizing principle that has existed in America throughout its history and still persists today. It's essentially a hierarchical system that incorporates race and class, but really goes beyond those factors. A person's position in the American caste system, as she tells it, affects every aspect of our lives, our behavior, what you can say and do, where and how you live, how you work, who you're friends with. And Wilkerson incorporates extensive research on India's caste system, as well as the hierarchy that was constructed by Nazi Germany, to demonstrate how caste is really all about creating false divisions so that certain people gain control and are able to keep it. It's one of those books that everyone should read to better understand our country's history, our current divisions, and how they can work to transcend them. Up next is Agent Sonia, which is definitely a good choice for the history buff on your list, especially someone that likes their history with a healthy dose of narrative. So you can think about like Erik Larson or Lynn Olson, even those people that love classic espionage novels, they would really love this. Ben McIntyre really hit the jackpot when he came upon this sort of stranger than fiction real life spy story. Ursula Kaczynski was one of the most important, dangerous female operatives in history, dyed-in-the-wool communist who changed the direction of the Cold War, all the while living in plain sight in the English countryside, living as Ursula Burton and raising her family. She was codenamed Sonia, and she was really a Soviet operative whose biggest mission was collecting British information on the nuclear bomb. McIntyre drew on her personal journals and her intelligence files to create this wonderfully nuanced, complicated portrait of a groundbreaking woman who traveled the world, evaded the Chinese, the Japanese, the Nazis, MI5, MI6, the FBI. And she was also a mother who worried about spending time away from her kids while she was doing this work. And she continually fooled the men around her, in large part because they underestimated her. That was definitely an interesting part of her long career as a Soviet spy. And now I have up next Paige isn't going to find it, what is already quite possibly the biggest book of the year, even though it hasn't come out yet. I'm talking about A Promised Land by our former president, Barack Obama. It's the first volume of his presidential memoirs, and it spans his early political development in his 20s up through his first campaign and his election as our 44th president. So it covers some of the major moments of his first term. And while we don't know yet when the second volume will come out, we really think that this one has been worth the wait. President Obama is a slow writer, but it's that careful, meticulous writing process that is really what makes this book so exciting. This is not just another presidential memoir. It will give us a glimpse into his presidency, the momentous events and decisions that shaped it, like the financial crisis and Wall Street reform, the passage of the Affordable Care Act. Those of you who read the New Yorker expert a couple weeks ago, that will be familiar. The operation that killed Osama bin Laden, and countless meetings and negotiations with members of Congress and world leaders. But as his editor put it, when the book was announced and we had this huge meeting where we all got to hear about the process of bringing this book into the world, his talent and eye for detail, his ear for dialogue really kind of enlivens the book with this voyeuristic energy of being in the White House with him. He's above all a writer's writer, and there is a lot about his and his family's personal journey, the triumphs and the struggles they experienced on the way to the highest office, and what their lives were like once they were actually living in the White House. So, I won't ignore the fact that it's a hefty price tag. It's $45, but it is literally hefty. You are getting 768 pages with 2 nice big photo inserts. I really can't imagine a better gift for those who love presidential memoirs or U.S. history, those that love world affairs, and of course, those who love the Obamas. So this goes on sale next Tuesday, November 17th, and you can pre-order your copy now. And the first review just went up, so go read that on the New York Times. Next up, I'm going to move on to what is truly a gift book, Exelibrus. Yeah, right there. So I don't know how well you guys can see this, but it's a little bit of a smaller trim. It's a beautiful reading list curated by legendary New York Times book critic Michiko Kakutani. You'd really be hard-pressed to find a reviewer whose taste is as universally trusted and respected as hers. And here she's sharing her top 140 books to make you both a well-rounded reader and, in a lot of ways, a better person. There's really something here for everyone: fiction, nonfiction, poetry of every stripe, with essays that are explaining why these books are so important to her personally. So you'll find Ralph Ellison and Saul Bellow alongside Elena Ferrante and Donna Tartt, Oliver Sacks, and Zadie Smith. There's even some kids' books on here, like Dr. Seuss and Maurice Sendak. And it's really just like the perfect thing for the person who you think might have read everything. It's the perfect thing for book clubs who want a little bit of help making their next selection. And it's just this really beautiful gifty package with a rounded spine. There's gold foil on the cover and really nice, pretty classic illustrations on the inside. Thank you, Paige, for showing it off so nicely. And now I'm going to jump over to the cookbook list. We published quite a few cookbooks on my side of things, but I really tried to narrow it down to the cream of the crop. And I'm going to start off with Ottolenghi Flavor. I'm sure that there must be some Yoram Ottolenghi fans out there. And here is he's returning to the plant-based small plate style that people who have plenty and plenty more will know and love. There are 100 vegetarian recipes here. Half of them are vegan, actually, which is really nice. And almost every dish is photographed for those of you who just feel a little bit cheated when you go to a recipe and you don't quite know what it's supposed to look like. I want to know what I'm going to be getting after I put in that work. And in addition to his Middle Eastern cuisine, he's also incorporating some Italian and Mexican influences as well, just to sort of amp up the flavor. And it also has a bit of a connection to his previous book, Simple, in that it's approachable, the ingredient list is manageable. So experienced home cooks will certainly find a lot to inspire them here, but it's also suitable for someone who's just trying to incorporate more vegetables into their diets without sacrificing flavor. Next, I'm going to touch really briefly on Modern Comfort Food by Anya Garten, but just for a moment, because I know that everybody already knows the Barefoot Contessa. This is actually her 12th cookbook. She is really one of the most trusted cookbook authors out there. And in her new book, she's giving us exactly what I think we all want: some satisfying, cozy recipes to satisfy our cravings. And a lot of these recipes, I think, will remind us of foods that we loved to eat while we were growing up, like enchiladas, tuna melts, Boston cream pie, black and white cookies. So these are just kind of natural, easy go-tos. And while I'm sure Ina had no way of knowing that we would be going through this here, she really ended up putting out the right book at the right time. It's like the perfect thing to get through the cold months, especially when we're all spending more time at home. And next up, I have another new cookbook from someone who many of us have come to rely on over the years, Kid in the Kitchen by Melissa Clark. I'm going to be brief about this one as well because Barrett and the Darien Library are going to be doing an event with her next week. So I'm sure that you are hearing a lot from them about it. But this is essentially exactly what you would expect from Melissa, in that it's an authoritative, accessible cookbook that really looks great, but she's writing for kids here, specifically 8 to 14-year-olds. She has her own 11-year-old, I think, 11 or 12. So this is definitely, coming from the best of both worlds, from somebody who's an experienced recipe developer and an actual kid. So who I'm sure taste tested everything. And so I think parents will like it too. The recipes aren't dumbed down. They're manageable, but the right skill level for kids. And most importantly, they are easy to clean up. So now we're going to finish off the cookbook section with something sweet. Dessert Person is the first baking book from pastry chef Claire Saffitz. She's a former Bon Appetit editor who she won a lot of fans as the host of their popular Gourmet Makes YouTube series. But I want to be clear that this is not just for like young millennial foodies. I'm a very enthusiastic baker myself, and I really think of Claire as kind of the next generation Dory Greenspan. She has this very authoritative confidence and relatability that is just so reassuring and kind of makes you think that yes, you absolutely can make this and it's going to come out great. Whether you've baked one cake in your life or whether you bake 100 of them. There are classics here like sour cherry pie, coffee cake, and also kind of more modern recipes like salted halva blondies, which I can personally promise you are absolutely delicious. I've baked quite a bit from this book already. And she calls her book A Defense of Baking, which I love because she's really kind of setting out to prove that baking is not just for followers who like strict measurements and aren't creative enough to be good cooks. I've never really understood that whole theory. Baking can be just as creative and versatile as cooking. It's just a little bit more indulgent. Okay, and lastly, I'm going to wrap up with a couple sneak peeks, books that are coming up early in the new year, 2021, that I am really excited about. So first up, we have, I don't know how well you guys can see that, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain by George Saunders. So most of us know and love George Saunders as the author of books like Civil War Land in Bad Decline, 10th of December, Lincoln in the Bardo, and indie bookstores and their customers have really been championing George for a super long time. But his students also love him. His day job is teaching in Syracuse University's very prestigious, hard to get into MFA program. And this book, which comes out in January, is really the closest any of us are probably going to get to taking a course with George. This is a literary masterclass in book form where he is really teaching us what makes great fiction work. And what better example could he be using than the Russians? So in here you have 7 classic short stories that are reprinted in full, in translation, of course, from writers like Chekhov, Tolstoy, and Gogol. Each is paired with an original essay from George explaining what makes them so remarkable. And we actually just had a little private class with booksellers and George just before this started, where he was talking about Gooseberries, short story that we all read in advance, and I promise you, he's not going to disappoint. If you are an enthusiastic reader or a writer, this is just it's like a love letter to writing, and it's just so wonderful. Okay. Lastly, I have The Smash Up, which is a debut novel from Ali Benjamin. It's actually not her first. She wrote the YA novel, The Thing About Jellyfish. This is her first novel for adults. Sorry if you guys can hear my hissing radiator in the background. I live in an old building and the heat conveniently just kicked on. But The Smash Up is kind of loosely based on Edith Wharton's classic story of a love triangle that's set in a small town. So there are shades of Ethan Frome at work here, but the story is very unmistakably of the moment. It centers on a marriage whose weaknesses are exposed by Trump's election and the Me Too movement. It's set in Starkfield, a small Massachusetts town that this couple moved to from Brooklyn looking for peace and quiet. But now, post-election, in the midst of the Kavanaugh hearings, many women have reached a sort of breaking point, and everyone, the men and the women, feels as if the ground is kind of shifting under their feet. For Ethan and Zoe, these changes hit at a pivotal time. They're in a rough point in their marriage. They have a young kid that requires a lot of energy. They're just in a little bit of a slump. They have a young house guest that's creating a lot of new tensions. And suddenly they're reassessing the lives that they want and kind of asking, what is a fair division of labor in a marriage? And what makes a good guy? And what do they want? So it's really just a great kind of timely novel that is ripe for discussion. And that is it for me. Oops, it looks like looks like we lost Paige. Paige, are you there? I don't know if I'm disconnected or if Paige is disconnected. Does somebody want to pop something in the chat if they can still hear me? Okay, so Jen's still here. Seems that we might have lost Paige. Yeah, right, exactly how we wanted to end our evening. Okay, well, I'm glad that everybody can still hear me. Well, while we're waiting for Paige to get back on, I don't know whether I'm going to have the ability to unmute Jen or Mackenzie, but the plan was that we were going to see if anybody had questions. You could just put them in the chat. Oh, Mackenzie, you're here. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry. I just figured out how to join you so that you weren't like here alone.
Thank you. Oh, okay. What is George's last name? It's George Saunders. So the title's a bit of a mouthful, admittedly. A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, which is taken from the short story Gooseberries that he has in there. And yeah, it's just this delightful mixture of essays and literary criticism from him. Anybody else have any questions for any of us?
Poor Paige. Oh, there's a little link.
Oh yeah, we should underscore that fact that pretty much everything is out, and the few things that aren't, you could definitely pre-order.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'd love to hear about if there's anything that we haven't talked about that people are thinking of giving as gifts for the holidays.
I'm getting dessert person actually for my mom, I think.
You cannot go wrong.
Yeah, my mom has turned into a baker, started out as a cook, is now a baker. Like no one was more shocked than me. And so I think, and I feel like you guys both had really good baking books. I feel like there's been kind of a dearth of baking books for a while. Like I feel like there aren't always that many. And then now I feel like this season has so many great ones.
Yeah, she's got a great matrix, like a chart in the beginning that helps you figure out how, based on how much time you have and how much of a challenge you want. It's got all of the recipes plotted on there for if you want something like a project, you can find something, and if you want something you can do in like, an hour.
And also, like I think I said in the chat, like I've made already many things from modern comfort food. Like we're literally making the Brussels sprout pizza tomorrow night. So it's already a staple.
Yeah, the tomato bisque is great. Test to that one. The salmon recipe is really good too. I love the fall because there's always such an amazing assortment of cookbooks. It's hard to pick. Yeah, Kid in the Kitchen is, I feel like that's such a great thing for her to have done because there aren't that many like really good quality cookbooks for kids out there.
My niece and nephew needed them. They're a little too old for it now. They're like 19 and 17, but oh my God, did they need something when they were 14 and like desperate to bake brownies or things like that.
Yeah, a lot of them are a little bit younger. There's not something for necessarily like preteens.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're in the chat. It won't just be Melissa Clark. She'll also have Jacques Pepin and Deb Perlman.
Oh, wow. That's a lineup.
And I have no idea what happened, but my computer just reset itself to 2018 is all I can say in the middle of the broadcast. And this is just tech life, people. So my apologies, but thank you so much to Jen, to Sophie, to Mackenzie. Such an incredible list. And these women are working so hard all day. And it was so kind of you to come out at night to spend time with us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You can find all of these books on our website. Come on in the store. We're here. Yes, Jen has one more thing.
There's one question in the Ask a Question section. Jane is asking, which is your favorite cookbook of the season?
Oh, okay. Good. Keep going.
I know.
Well, obviously. Fine.
Yeah, mine is definitely Dessert Person, which I guess doesn't count because you can't just have dessert all the time, but
oh, you can.
You could. Maybe you shouldn't.
All right. Thank you all so much. So nice to see you all. And again, I don't know what to say about that technical difficulty, but now I've seen a lot now. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.